back to another installment of the 706, sponsored by the Teetotaler Boys, and a new mocktail flavor named Gia. I highly recommend it. But for today, we're here to discuss 1988's Bull Durham, a film which stars Kevin Costner, Susan Sarandon, and Tim Robbins. It is the story of Kevin Costner's Crash, who comes into a minor league team to mentor the Wild Nuke, played by Tim Robbins, all while pursuing a sort of love triangle, although it doesn't quite follow, I think, that conventional approach between the two of them and Susan Sarandon, who plays a kind of fervent fan, almost a groupie, to this sort of minor league team, all set during the kind of minor league team of 1987, or sorry, the season of 1987. Now, this movie is, I think, a kind of different one for the group. It's a sports film. It's a sentimental, at some points, romantic film. It is also an adult film in the way that maybe these people, my co-hosts, would disagree with me. That doesn't really feel like it gets quite made anymore. Although I think Tony maybe will throw out some like Serbian films to counter that point or something. But let's get to it. Sorry, I missed this crucial part. I'm terrible at this, but I am your host, Anthony, today, and we are joined by, in any order,
Tony.
Hey, this is Kirk. I'm also drinking some Gia. I got 4-pack for $22.99 at Murray's Cheese. It was a discount. Very happy to be here.
And I'm Connor. I got the Pepsi. My Teetotaler boys know that's the usual. That's the drink. And I hold a bachelor's degree. This may become important later.
Perfect. Now, as I said, Bull Durham may be a different pick, at least from the last set of films we've done. I believe Kirk picked this film. I also believe none of us had seen it. Is that true? Okay, none of us had seen it, although maybe many of us, if we're of a certain age, would be familiar with our parents or uncles having this on VHS. Now, I think what I want to start with is Kirk. Since you picked a film, you are also someone who's often more into the kind of mainstream sort of approach to filmmaking at times, or at least odd films that don't necessarily neglect their mainstream audiences. Bull Durham was a big hit in 1988. But how did the film work for you in 2024? And what did you have to say about it? Did it work at all? Did you hate it? What's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. And I would just say thank you for bringing this movie forward. By association, I'm also thanking myself because I chose it. So, I'll take that. Congratulations as well. But I thought, it's a great movie. It's very fun. I can tell why it's timeless. It's one of those situations that I think we've talked about before, where there's a film that feels somewhat like a progenitor in the space, but because you've seen all the films that have kind of been influenced by it, you're tricked into feeling as though the original, kind of the mold, was in some way reiteration of something already played out, something that's already been done before. And so I have to kind of cognitively, challenge that automatic assumption when I'm watching this, because I'm like, I feel like, oh, I've seen this before, right? These dynamics, you got the young, dumb rookie who's got a lot of talent. You got the grizzled vet who's, he's cynical. He has he's kind of closed off to the world. He never made it to the big leagues. The story's been played out a lot. I think the Susan Sarandon character is the most interesting and perhaps fresh or novel character or archetype that, I've seen in a sports movie. I can't really think of such a, kind of sex positive, very straightforward female character in that way. I'm trying to rack my brain. They're usually kind of cloaked in metaphor and euphemism and innuendo, I should say. But so I appreciate that. I think it, in that way, that could be straight out of a movie in 2024. Felt very new, just different. And as far as the film itself, I can appreciate its place in kind of the cultural or the sports movie pantheon. It's right up there for sure. And, it satisfies the romantic comedy itch. I think the fact that it likely did and does and still does appeal to both, men, and I'm going to paint with a very broad brush here, but men who, like sport, baseball, and then maybe women. And I think this is obviously what it was catered to. It was meant to bring the two together, to be a date night you could see, and both could, the man and the woman could walk out, with a sense of enjoyment. And of course, that's not to say that that's true for everyone. I think I'm speaking in kind of like very marketing terms, So I think that's an ingenious piece of this, because oftentimes sports movies rely heavily on certain tropes that push it into one direction or another. And I think this one kind of bridged the gap between a very poignant sports movie with some character development, highlighting the very fragile nature of being a prospective professional athlete. Essentially, you're on an island and everything's working against you. It's a heroic endeavor, a very kind of gladiatorial thing, and at the same time, you have these intimate relationships that span age and dispositions, and I think that's kind of cool too. That you have this triangulation with Crash, played by Kevin Costner, Nuke, Tim Robbins' character, and Susan Sarandon's character Annie. I think her character as well. So things that I liked how at the end it kind of tied the two together, whereas at the beginning it felt a little disparate. I mean, I know she gave that little preamble about she hasn't found any religion, Annie, that is, she hasn't found any religion that she could attach herself to, and baseball is like this, I don't know what kind of description she gave. It was rather long-winded, but baseball is simple, right? Baseball is about not overthinking, and it's exciting, things like that. I think the way that it tied together at the end, contrasting baseball, or the courage that it takes to put oneself out there as a minor league player, as somebody on the low end of the totem pole, and then also somebody who's the vulnerability that's inherent to engaging in in a successful and productive relationship or affair. I think there's something there. The arrogance, right, as he says, the arrogance and the confidence that both take and both require, while at the same time the ability to not have to think or to push your mind out of the way so that you can allow those more visceral moments to take precedence. I think there's definitely some overlap there, and I think it's quite poetic. As far as downsides to the movie, I think Tim Robbins is just too dopey. It may just be the way the character is written, but I just never have been a Tim Robbins fan. I didn't like him. I thought he was a dope in Mystic River. I thought he was not great in, he was okay, like in Shawshank, but I think there are a lot of actors who could have done that role. And so consequently, I'm probably biased against him to begin with, but yeah, just whenever Nuke would talk in the first half of the movie, I would just be, I just kind of cringe a little bit. It just didn't feel right. Kevin Costner's character felt much more like what I'm used to in a sports film. I get that the Newt character is supposed to be, brash and confident, but he just came off as dopey. And I don't know if that's an actor thing, that's a me thing, or that's a writing thing. And, I will say, I wish they had used some more of that. I don't know what you would even call it, like meditative jazz or very intimate and touching and affirming jazz that they played towards the end, or not jazz, but what was it, a sax? Yeah, just it felt the writers were actually catching up to the fact that this movie did have some ability to be moving in a way, and it felt like they were just kind of holding their dicks for the first hour 10. So I think without the last act, this film would not be what it is today, but it did finish very strong. So for that, I appreciate it. But I have more thoughts. I'll shut up now.
No, it's interesting. It's also I guess maybe it's important to point out, it's like a single A team. that like we're following, which is like the lowest of the pecking order in terms of minor league baseball. But maybe there's more to say on that and everything you've said, Kirk, in a second. Let's see. I'll go Connor. How did you feel about it?
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, no, I was definitely like I was skeptical as I came into this movie. I'm like, how am I going to like find my way into this movie? What is going to attach me to it? You know, baseball, I frankly I haven't followed baseball very closely in my life. I do enjoy watching baseball in person, not so much on TV. I'm just not really exposed to the language. I've never really played the sport. Certainly, this was a movie that was rich in the jargon of baseball. I'm not sure how it feels to someone who really knows baseball, but it feels pretty like in depth in terms of, and again, focusing on this like minor league team. It's very sort of obscure as far as like interesting stories of baseball. You would think. And overall, the premise of the movie is such an interesting, unexpected kind of premise. I'm not sure like how did the director kind of come up with this, arrive at this? There may be a story there, but I read a little bit about that. But if you know what I mean, it's just how did this get greenlit? This is such an unusual, sort of premise. This idea of this, like not only romantic comedy, but a story about, really about sex in large degree, sexual relationships explicitly, not some vague idea of romance, like a Hollywood idea of romance, and about baseball. And then you think for a second and you're like, oh, well, actually, you think about it. This never comes up in the movie, but, I think in like American popular culture, we actually use a lot of like baseball metaphors about sex, right? Kind of the idea of like batting, hitting, catcher's mitt, this kind of thing. Think about baseball. And of course, like the base metaphor. So without having to kind of say all of that, there is this real like link. It really thematically works very, very well. In addition to this kind of idea of this, which is again also attached to, we have this attachment, this connection to literature too, as a form of kind of pleasure that also involves. There's kind of interesting. It's kind of a metaphor that's kind of parallel to baseball and to sex as well. And very, very interesting connecting Walt Whitman and what Whitman said about baseball. And, it's just very smart. It was a very intelligent and very well done, kind of thematically coherent movie that I found really impressive. That really like captured the benevolence for me. I was on board, through, very quickly in the first act. And I enjoyed this movie overall. I hope we can talk about it more. I think just like the only thing that I'm kind of left kind of like puzzled by is kind of the ending and what am I supposed to really take away? If I could summarize what this movie is about, or if there's like a lesson. I know there's no lesson typically, but like I'm left with like not a very strong takeaway sort of by the end of the movie, but that may just be me subjectively. But that's what I would like to discuss a little bit. But I really did enjoy this movie, and I think just its first act really really intrigued me and really impressed me. So this is a very strong pick, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. That's a great thing with any sports movie, right? Or any kind of movie about a particular subject or a particular theme. It's like, how much does your background knowledge of that, how much of it is going to inform how you read things within the movie, how you take things or accept it. I used to play baseball as a kid all the way into high school, but never really followed it. Never really followed the professional things. But my father-in-law is like passionate about it. One of these people who has fantasy league statistics about teams, and I understand the level of obsession. Also, second John Sexton reference over this Zoom. But of course, we have to acknowledge his book, Baseball as a Path to God, which
That's right.
intersects baseball and religious life, or the lack of it. So anyway, I'll leave it there and just say that I found it curious how you thought the movie left you puzzled with its end, whereas I think Kirk was suggesting it was actually a kind of strong note for him. So we'll get to that in a second. But Tony, take us away.
Well, I thought the ending was the most average part of the movie, so I'm splitting the difference. No, I thought this movie was very strong. I'm not like I do like baseball, but it's not my favorite sport. It's not something I follow super, super closely. I remember when Anthony pitched the movie, he described it kind of as adults, and I think that's what I liked most about the movie. Not just in terms of the depiction of sex and the the discussion of sex, but in terms of the dynamics of the various characters, I thought that this movie had a sense of kind of melancholy to it that I really appreciated, that I think is in a lot of romantic comedies is completely absent. I think that's one of the reasons the genre leaves me cold so often. But this is a romantic comedy that feels very in tune with human relationships and the difficulties of human relationships, and things like aging and so forth. I think the fact that it is about baseball, or about, it doesn't have to be baseball necessarily, but about sports, is important, because, it's a physical thing. And as you get older, if you're trying to be a professional, certainly there's a relatively short window you have. Your body, wears down over time. There's only so much you can do. And that's, Kevin Costner's, what he's sort of facing is the fact that he's a person who kind of had the potential at a major league career, and he had a very short-lived stint in the major leagues, but he's now basically at a point in his life where that door is basically closing. And I thought that his struggle with that, I found to be very, like, kind of compelling and resonant. And I think that what's interesting about the movie is, I think that if you look at other sports movies and other romance movies, the remarkable restraint this movie shows in terms of, like, even the way the love triangle is depicted. There's so many opportunities for drama that the movie sort of, or cheap conflict that the movie kind of studiously avoids. As far as the sports angle, you don't have, like, the rival, you don't have the rival team, I should say. You don't have the big championship game. There's no big climactic game at the end of the movie. It feels very banal, very everyday. Baseball is, as Susan Sarandon says in a voiceover, it is a job for these people. And I think there's that tension between the kind of the metaphysical side, or the philosophical side, or what baseball kind of means to these people, and then the practical day-to-day reality of doing that thing, which I think is something that a lot of people can relate to, as far as, what it means to, quote unquote, pursue your passions and so forth. And I think that who's the filmmaker? I don't remember off the top of my head.
His name's Ron Shelton, who, this was his, I think, debut. I could be wrong, but he never really had a huge career, although it feels kind of odd to say that. His two biggest highlights are probably, he was the screenplay writer on Bad Boys 2, but he was also the director and writer of the original White Man Can't Jump.
Gotcha.
So,
okay, I did see that.
film.
I did not remember his name, but I did look that up, and I think that he shows, like, a pretty sure hand here. I think for a debut, I think there's some lovely little moments, like when Susan Sarandon and Kevin Costner are passing notes back and forth, and you have this lovely shot of the boy with the note walking back and forth. There's a great shot of Susan Sarandon just sitting quietly in her room listening to Edith Piaf. And I just think that the movie has this kind of I don't want to lean too hard on the movie melancholy, because it is a comedic film. It's a fun movie to watch. There's exciting scenes, but there's that feeling of kind of adultness, that feeling of seriousness pervades the movie, I think, and in a way that where it doesn't feel gimmicky. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be rubbing your face in anything, negative or any kind of harsh realities. It feels very kind of everyday and very banal. And I think that's the movie's great credit, in the way that it's able to kind of demystify, these topics of sex and baseball. And I also think that another interesting through line here is that the poetry, Susan Sarandon is always reading poetry. She's very into literature and poetry. And there's this scene where Crash is talking to Nuke and saying, you got to get your cliches down. And he gives him these list of kind of these really, like, banal cliches to use in interviews, which has a hilarious payoff at the end of the movie when he uses them all. He just shoots his wad. He reads them all in one kind of monologue, goes through every single one. But I think that's interesting too. Just kind of that idea of, like, there's the thing, there's the lived experience of doing the thing, whatever it might be. And then there's how we think about it, how we conceptualize it. And obviously, Nuke, who is not articulate, who doesn't have these like really deep, profound feelings about baseball, ultimately finds greater success, right? Because it's about not thinking, it's about doing. And I love Kevin Costner's line towards the end of the movie, which I think is real the climax, kind of the point of the movie. When Connor says that he's not sure what the point is, I think he says, I can listen to your theories all day, but I want to just be. And I think that's what the movie's about, is about what it means to just be. to exist as a person, whether in a relationship or in your career or with your passions, and the idea of kind of living in the moment, and accepting kind of what comes. I think is what the movie's kind of trying to get at. But I found it pretty emotionally resonant and pretty powerful. So I thought it was a very good romantic slash sports film. Yeah. My only objection is a moral objection, which is that Susan Sarandon was definitely grooming Tim Robbins. Tim Robbins is violated in every movie he does. This is in that tradition. And I think she should have gone to prison at the end of the film. That's my one objection. Otherwise, great pick.
Yeah, that's the original ending, which you could still find on the Criterion DVD. But no, I
Is that
don't think
Bill
that's how it
Durham?
is.
Is that Bill Durham?
I had this movie recommended to me by an acquaintance, and I kind of like Connor. I think I kind of came into it just kind of happy someone had put a movie in front of me, without me having to think about what to watch that night. And I was really surprised and taken away by what I saw for reasons I think you articulated really well, Tony, about the adultness of it, the subject matter, that baseball isn't just this trope. I think in some ways, maybe this movie could be praised because you could imagine a movie that does things differently. You could imagine a movie where Tim Robbins is like, if I hit this home run, I'm taking Susan Sarandon out on a date tonight, or something, some weird kind of like egotistical, homosocial moment that just takes taken to the extreme. But no, we actually kind of just see a kind of two lives play out along with Annie's, who is, as I said in the beginning, a true baseball fan. She absolutely loves the sport, but in some way, she absolutely loves it because it replaces the thing that gives her meaning. She doesn't really have anything else outside of literature, and she's looking for something just to kind of install that purpose. There's a reason she has a different boy each season. She doesn't go out of the way, but she finds a new lover from the team that way, and so forth. I think one thing that fascinates me is, yeah, Tim Robbins' acting could be absolutely dopey and mawkish at times, but there's also something I think from Crash's perspective, and I think from even most people's perspective, absolutely infuriating about who Nuke represents. Someone with all the talent in the world that we want, someone with all the talent that could get us to that place that we were promised, but just doesn't take themselves seriously enough to harness it, to develop it, or to use it. And one thing I really appreciate in the movie is that Crash is absolutely aware of this, and he's absolutely aware of his own place 13 years into this minor league team, that he's going nowhere as a player. That's the kind of melancholy that pervades his storyline partly throughout the film. But he's also kind of willing to sometimes put himself aside, even if he egotistically eggs Nuke on, even if he knows how to push his buttons. He wants this guy to kind of do what he couldn't at the end of the day. And while Nuke ultimately does get to the MLB, Crash is, I don't know if it's worse off than where we left him, but he's pushed into a new kind of direction. And so it's like, is he really going to go get a management position in this like low level baseball? What's he going to do? All he has is his life ahead of him, something to put down ahead, and something to put down, the next step, the next chapter, or whatever it may be. And so I think ultimately the film was just a huge surprise. I think, as I've said before, these are people I absolutely believe would exist. And these are people I absolutely believe their interactions are legitimate. I could see these things playing out, hearing a kind of version of what's going on, which just felt so refreshing and so different than these other kind of now, like, I think more cheesy or more cartoonish rom-coms that came out in the decade after. And I also just have to appreciate is Ron Shelton, who had worked as like a second director and a screenwriter a little before. But this was his major debut. It was obviously informed by his life. I was reading before or after I first watched the film that, he had a little bit of experience in minor league, also never quite made it. And so I just also found that angle something to kind of tangentially as a spice on top of everything I appreciated about the film. Now, I don't know if I have, these huge readings, but I don't think this movie necessarily needs to beg for that or call for it. But there are moments of interactions that I find curious or maybe have questions on. But I think we got to talk about the ending, since that's what Connor and Kirk and Tony, you have all mentioned. What is up with this ending? Does it? I suppose, Kirk, it didn't quite work for you, but how do we feel about it? I mean, there is kind of this interesting moment where just before it quite ends, you almost think the movie, although we're trained by Hollywood to know it's not going to quite be this way, or we don't expect it to be this way. For a second, it seems like Crash is just running away from Annie, and then of course they're reunited and they're dancing over the under the credits as they scroll by. But what do we think of the ending in particular? Tony, what did you have to say on it? We'll start with you.
Yeah, and I mean, you know me. I was like, he's gonna run away. It's gonna be the sad ending, and that's what I wanted. And of course, there was a part of me that would have liked it to end on that tone. And I think there is something a little bit cheesy about them literally dancing over the credits. I think we could have done without that. However, I don't think it's necessarily wrong that they get back together. I think that is more satisfying dramatically because another thing I think that distinguishes this movie from a lot of romantic movies is that, really they're not really a couple at any real point in the movie. I mean, they sort of he walks away and she's with Tim Robbins for basically the entire movie. And now that is a trope, obviously, because you have to have some sort of source of conflict. You have to have a reason that your two romantic leads aren't together. But it doesn't play out in the way it typically would. And they're not really dating, they're not in a relationship. And when they come together at the end of the movie, it almost feels like something that hasn't been discussed before, or something that it doesn't feel, it feels inevitable without feeling like we've just been waiting for this to happen the whole time, if that makes any sense. So I like that they get together. I don't mind that, they have the little fake out where he does his. I think, in fact, that there is something kind of cute about the fact that she, can sense that he breaks his record or whatever, but it's meaningless to the larger world. I think there's something kind of sweet about that. I guess I don't like the final image of the movie or the final moment of the movie of them dancing over the credits. I just think to me, that just strikes kind of a sour note and kind of goes against the feeling and the tone that I had enjoyed up to that point in the movie. But I do love too their extended sex scene as kind of a payoff too. I think it's so well done. It's so erotic. It's so powerful. And I think it's like I don't know why we don't get scenes like that in modern kind of romantic movies. I thought it was very well done. So I thought the movie was successful as far as kind of a general kind of happily ever after, life goes on sort of thing. I don't know what his quote unquote, management career is going to look like. I don't think it really matters in the context of the movie. I think the point is just that life continues. The point for his character is that he accepts that. The fact is that he's willing to pursue that, but he's accepted that he's not going to be, a famous Hall of Famer. He knows that that's not going to happen. And he's accepting that there's this new path that's open to him, as is for Susan Sarandon, there's this new path opening to her. She's going to abandon this kind of, tradition, ritual she has and give herself to the one person. So I think as far as romantic endings go, I think it works well on a character level.
Yeah, and can we just also bring up how Nuke, when they're on the kitchen counter, knocks over this milk and then just leaves the next day, and that milk is just staining and like spilling still. Anyway, it's just kind of it annoyed me though this time. Crash. Yeah, it just annoyed me this time. But Kirk, did hearing Tony or Connor speak to their feelings change anything, or do you still feel let down? I don't remember the word you used, disappointed, or just didn't quite feel right.
Wait, I was actually positive on the ending. Are you talking to Connor, or just in general?
I thought you were disappointed on the ending. Sorry, Kirk.
No, I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was good.
Yeah, rewind the tape, Tony. No. Okay.
No, Connor, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I still hate it. It's bad. I know. Honestly, I feel a bit disarmed. I'm not sure what my qualms were. Honestly, I have to say it's been a little while since I watched it, so I was a little fuzzy on the exact details of the back and forth of why exactly, what happens with him leaving the letter and leaving. What was that supposed to mean? Okay, it's kind of like a fake out. He changed his mind, right? He still can have the management job and be with her, right? I guess why do we need to have that? Anyway, it's a nice little bit of a twist at the very end, making their getting together feel more impactful. I guess if there could have been more of like an intellectual side or like a sort of character moment, I'm trying to think, but I'm not sure that wasn't there, honestly, because I think Tony is really drawing all of the themes together for me with his description of the ending, That's not too, it's not a crazy interpretation. Obviously, it's like, yes, he's kind of hit the end of the road in terms of his advancement. This possibility of going to the show, to the majors, is closed off. He's too old. He can do this management. Obviously, he loses his job. Ultimately, he'll have to take that new path. And yes, just kind of accepting that. Obviously, I think that's totally acceptable. I do enjoy the very ending. I do enjoy the last shot. I believe there's some kind of parallel with Nuke and Annie dancing at some point. I think it's some kind of a callback, but I can't remember exactly. So I'm sorry. I have to kind of defer a little bit here to my colleagues. I think it's a strong ending, really.
Yeah, she asks him to dance. That's the first thing she does when she meets Crash, and he says no. And then Nuke comes by, and then he's like, "Oh, let's dance." Crash steps up because he obviously wants to keep her or steal her from Nuke. Yeah, so I think there was a certain level of synchronicity there, but I've been thinking about more about this, and like baseball is one of the most brutal sports there is. I mean, at least one of the most brutal team sports there is, because you are kind of judged based on your solo performance, and no other team sport is less contingent upon your teammates, at least on offense. I mean, you can get runs by other people on your team getting hits, but your batting average largely is a reflection of how good you are. It's not a reflection of how good your team is. See, the best players in baseball have usually been regarded in the past 5 years as Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. They were both on the Angels, who famously sucked the last few years. So it just kind of goes to show that it's kind of a collection of individuals playing a team sport. But I think what's very brutal about it is that there is a certain level of chance, obviously, or of just kind of randomness involved. I forget the hitter's name. I think it's Chris Davis from the Orioles. Overall, a fine hitter, power hitter. I want to say within the last 10 years, might have been like 2016, he had a 47 at-bat hitless streak. And you go back and actually look at where, based on the exit velocity of the batted balls and the launch angle, the possibility that he wouldn't have gotten a hit based on the 47 times or however many times he made contact, because he struck out, I think, like so like based on the 28 times he made contact, was like 1 in a million. So you just kind of look at that. That doesn't really happen in any other sport, right? It's so much more immediate. It feels as though baseball, you have this ability to either win 15-2 or win 1-0. It's highly variable, and so I think that just adds to the romantic nature of the game, and the fact that like one game in and of itself isn't life or death. It's a collection of actions, and so there's some tie in there to like building the foundation with somebody, to kind of viewing things in the aggregate, to accepting the good with the bad, and how we evaluate somebody's character as a potential mate. I don't know. It's a very, loose take I'm formulating here. But also my other take is, I don't know if this is a sports movie. Like if you were to judge this solely on like, does it fulfill that sports movie itch? And I know I said it was earlier. I don't know if it does. I can think of better sports baseball movies, like For the Love of the Game, which Kevin Costner was also in. I think is better. What was The Rookie? I think with who's the guy who looks Dennis Quaid? I think is another better baseball movie. Bad News Bears, or is Bad News Bears football? No, it's baseball.
That's baseball.
It's baseball.
Yeah. Okay.
Both
I
of them.
almost psyched myself out, but there are, even A League of Their Own, like to me, I think is a better sports movie. Like the times they're on this road trip they're more fun. They're more, jovial. There's more jokes. There's better characters. Not better as in better crafted, but there's more entertainment to be had. And I think my measuring stick for this is if like Bull Durham came on, I don't know if you could like really, really love just watching one scene before you flip back over to to whatever you're watching, like on Thanksgiving Day or something. Whereas that's true for movies like Major League. That's true for movies like, I don't know, The Longest Yard or Rudy. I just feel like this movie is not like your typified sports movie, and maybe that's me splitting hairs. But if you were to say like judge this as a sports movie, I would probably give it like a 5 out of 10. So that's just where I'm putting my head, and maybe it's just it's a taxonomical thing that doesn't even matter. But I don't know. Does Anthony? I feel like Anthony, you've probably seen the most sports movies alongside me out of the four of us. Do you get that sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't kind of play by the traditional rules of a sports
It doesn't.
film.
I wonder if part of the problem for you though is like it has all the conventions of a sports film, but it doesn't necessarily execute them to that end in the way we would typically see it. At the same time, like if I think about it, I can't think of another movie. I mean, also like Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner, another baseball film for him. It's like hard to think of a movie though where sport is this crucial to these people's lives in a way where it's not going to just economically better them. It's not just going to, get them out of, hoop dream style of their unfortunate kind of poverty. It's not going to lift up, the trophy at the end of the season. The movie doesn't do any of that, but instead it suggests that here is a path for them that makes them willing to live like another day or to go to another day. I mean, I think Annie is just like, she teaches at the college, but baseball really is it. And she's just the fan. And so in some ways, I think the movie, maybe it doesn't satisfy us because it doesn't carry the visceral excitement of actually playing. It doesn't really care about that though. It just cares about just sharing with it. I don't know, the mundanity of it, the kind of just routineness of it. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but you're right. It doesn't have the miracle moment of, the last shot to win the game. It's also baseball, which is famously a sport that many people struggle with to watch for excitement over the TV or, unless they're at the game. It's like a sport that you hear that all the time. It doesn't have basketballs back and forth, acceleration, doesn't have soccer, football, the speed of the game, the, endless anticipation of it. So maybe there's something different too with just watching a baseball film. It also, it's a comedy, but it's not Bad News Bears where it's throwing you a joke every second. It's very interested in set pieces at times. The garter, which is kind of like a repetitive kind of like gag that they just poke fun at, and it finally comes loose, I think. So all that's to say is, yeah, I kind of understand where you're getting at, but I don't know if I agree, but I could see where you're coming from. So I don't know
think
if
another
anyone
good
else
example is The Wrestler. If you look at a movie like The Wrestler, where there's never really any illusion that what's the guy's actor's name? Shit, Mickey Rourke's character.
Yeah.
There's never an illusion that he's ever going to get back to the WWE, right, or whatever the equivalent in the film. It's like he's done, and he's kind of coping with that, and he finds a relationship with Marissa Tomei in that way. So I think that's a very salient analog, maybe with less romance and more brutality in that film. It's a little more visceral, and mimetic, but I think that's a good analog.
There should definitely been a scene of Kevin Costner cutting his forehead with the razor blade. I think that move would have really put this movie over the top.
Yeah, I just got to say too, last thing is, Kirk, your point reminded me is like, I've heard this, I don't remember, I think it's like Camus who says this about soccer, but he says if you're the goalkeeper, like it's hilarious because if your team wins, it has nothing to do with you. But if you lose, it has everything to do with you. And in some sense, like almost every player has that, but on like the offensive side when it comes to baseball, you're responsible for getting your own hit. But you're also alone when you're out on the field. If you're, a ball's coming to you, whether you're in the right outfield or, second base or something. And you just hope you make the right play. And then you hope your teammate makes the right play. But there's only so much you could help someone else. So much of it is kind of individualistic sport, however much we commodify the team, spirit and teamwork and team chemistry together. So anyway, well, I see we're getting past time, so I'll just say one last thing. Tony brought this up, but did the movie's comedy work? Just curious. What do we think about it? I mean, it is labeled as that, and it was seen at the time as like this like huge comedy. I think it was like the second like highest rated film of that year, but people like really celebrate it for its laughs. I don't know if Connor or Kirk or whoever.
It's not like a laugh out loud funny movie. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not Airplane or something, but I think there are a few. There are definitely moments. Yeah, I guess like it's not like I wouldn't say in the way that Kirk says, "Oh, it's a 5 out of 10 as a sports movie." I don't think it's like a great comedy. I think the other elements kind of carry it for me, but I do think there are definitely moments that work for me comedically. As I alluded to, that final interview with Tim Robbins, I think is very funny. I think Tim Robbins, for all his dopiness, I think they do get some kind of comic mileage out of that when he throws. He's constantly breaking windows with the ball. I think that's kind of a funny little running gag. And just like, fuck, I think that there's something very like, I think universally comedic about that. So not an uproarious movie, but I think the comic bits are well placed and land well.
I think there's one moment where it's like towards kind of the climax where it should be like a very tense moment, and then it's everything is going wrong at once. Kevin Costner says, "Well, like this guy, like we have to sacrifice a chicken to like take the curse off his mitt, and then we have to like oh, so and so, like we need to like do something for a registry and stuff." And like they kind of all like there's something. It should be very intense and kind of stressful, but there's this kind of just agreement to just we just like take care of things one thing at a time. We got to figure something out, which I thought was kind of characteristic of the movie. This kind of mature, kind of just like we'll figure out some way, we'll muddle through, and rather than playing it up for total drama. But there was something kind of nice about that candor of the movie, of the characters, especially the Kevin Costner character. I think kind of carries the tone of the whole movie. Annie as well, Susan Sarandon as well. I think that's kind of is charming, maybe not hilarious to me, but yeah.
I know that's interesting. Okay, so we'll just wrap up, and if anyone has any last thoughts on it, is this movie part of the 706? We have no idea what number we're at, I think, but is it? Let's start with, in the order I first initially called on people, Kirk.
Yeah, Anthony, I think it's hard to say it can't be or it shouldn't be. It would be a disservice to our canon to be so narrow-minded as to miss a film like this. Film with such cultural significance, an authentically American film. I don't think we really touched on that, but very much ingrained in kind of what people think of Americana as they look back nostalgically over the decades, at least the last 40 years. So I would have to say definitely a yes. And one last point. Usually, and this goes back to my sports theory, usually in a sports movie, there is a turning point. I don't feel like there was a turning point, or the turning point was delineated enough. It felt like all of a sudden one game he just started pitching well, and I guess it came down to the fact that he wasn't having sex. But I wish Kevin Costner would have been a little bit, would have been highlighted as more instrumental in Nuke's kind of progression, but I think it was implied based on all the advice he gave him over time. But anyways, regardless, it's a yes. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Kirk. And you just reminded me, I just wanted to add this because you brought it up. I looked it up. The current highest average in the MLB this season is Ohtani at .358, which is always hilarious to me. I know it's the cliche about baseball, but the fact that the greatest hitter currently in the league is only hitting at a rate where he's like a little over 30% of the time. Just always fascinating. Anyway, so Kirk says yes. Connor, where are you at?
Of course, I'm still thinking. I really like this movie. I'm a little worried about the possibility that it might kind of displace or make more difficult a chance for, I think, a more definitive Kevin Costner movie, kind of similar movie. I, of course, mean Waterworld. Sorry, I guess I was alluding to the Field of Dreams. Anyway, I'm talking about Waterworld. That, for me, is the definitive Kevin Costner role, for better or worse. But no, I'm going to give this a yes for the reasons above mentioned. I really enjoy this movie. Its maturity, as everyone said, the themes, it's strong. It all hangs together. It's kind of like the prequel to Baseball as a Road to God, as Anthony mentioned. And also because now he has his PhD, I literally cannot not prove a movie that he recommends as a lowly bachelor's degree holder.
It's a truth, you know. Once you get your PhD, you realize that you're just always right, and that's a burden. So I got to admit that. Okay, so there's no suspense, but Tony, what do you have to say? Did your grandfather end up writing his book about this film? What's going on here?
He did not, but let's just say he has a lot to say about Waterworld. That's kind of his main area of study. Also, I've never played this card, but you're talking to a JD here, which is actually even more important and impressive. So I won't use that. I won't play that card right now. I have a meaningless vote here. I will give it a yes for all the reasons I and others have said. And I also do want to say that podcasting is a sport of sorts. And I'm happy to announce that Stitcher has extended a Otani level $1 billion contract to me for the next 10 years. I'm very excited for our ongoing partnership, and I hope we find a lot of team success over at Stitcher.
We'll miss you,
All
Tony.
right. Also, cue the famous Lionel Hutz Simpsons clip of just what America needs: more lawyers. So
Can you imagine a world without lawyers and you see everyone holding hands and there's rainbows?
all right, let's wrap this up, guys. It's getting late. Tony has a game to watch. He never misses a basketball game in his life. So, final section, in which these three pitch a movie to watch for the next 706. Will Connor do Ed Wood once more? Will Tony try to get us to watch Mishima once more? What's going on? Who went least recent? What's the order? Kirk, you picked this one.
Okay, so Tony.
Tony went least recent. So Tony, what's the order?
I don't feel very prepared. I'm going to go last, even if it screws me. I want Connor to go first.
Okay, I'll keep it snappy. Recommended before. It's got to go. It's Anthony's turn to recommend it. Postman always rings twice. 1946 drama, MGM drama, directed by Tay Garnett, starring Lana Turner. A famous suspense film, sort of in the vein of Double Indemnity, also based on a James M. Cain novel. Different from Double Indemnity in many ways. It's a thriller. It's a fascinating film. It is a truly erotic film in a way that the modern cinema cannot give us. That's my take. Anyway, that's me. That's mine.
No, that was fascinating, Connor. Yeah, I think it's the movie Frank Sinatra watched. He saw a photo of or still of Lana Turner and was like, I have to have her. That's the mythology about it. So, Kirk, what do you have?
All right. So I'm gonna go with 1974's Dog Day Afternoon. Sidney Lumet film, obviously starring the irreplaceable Al Pacino. Also has, I don't know how to say his last. Is it Cazale or Cazale? John Cazale. Fredo from The Godfather, very famously. Very interesting movie. I think, Anthony, as you prepare to leave this sprawling metropolis, it's time we head to a film that was shot on what feels like one summer night with a bunch of rowdy hooligans in I don't know where, Prospect Heights maybe. It definitely was filmed on location. It's a great movie. You really get a sense of the city in the 70s. And then obviously there are some kind of very harrowing moments relating to sexuality and the repression of sexual desire, alternative sexual orientations, and gender identities. And, just a very fun heist movie, it's a great movie. I don't know if it's a heist movie. It's a drama that under the auspices of a bank heist. I'm not really sure how to totally describe it, but basically for those who don't know, it's about Al Pacino and a friend rob a bank. They get caught in a standoff with police in Brooklyn, and drama ensues. So it's a great movie. It's an all-timer. That's my choice.
That's interesting. You got the noirs, you got the crime dramas. Tony, what do you have?
I'll say very solid picks, especially Dog Day Afternoon. I've thought about pitching that myself. That is an excellent film. I'd be down to rewatch both of those. I'm going back and forth here a little bit. You guys helped me narrow it down a bit. I'm going to go with another Lee Chang-dong film. Another Lee Chang-dong, director of Oasis, and on other films. This is Peppermint Candy from 1999. 1999, one of the great film years of all time. This is not a movie that's typically discussed as one of the highlights of that year, probably because it's a Korean film, but I think that's a shame. I think it's a true classic, one of his best films. I don't like it quite as much as Oasis just because I have a kind of a personal connection to that movie, but I think it's similar in that it deals with some very heavy themes, very serious themes. It's a movie about a man committing suicide, and then it's sort of what follows is it's sort of an episodic story showing chapters in this person's life, and it's a movie that deals with kind of trauma and violence and memory. It's a very painfully human film and a very beautiful film. And I think that it hits a lot of the same notes as Oasis while being very different in terms of its subject matter. But I think it would be a very juicy pod pick, TM. And so that's my pitch for this week.
Have we watched any of his other stuff for the cast, or is it just Oasis?
I don't think so. I think I pitched some
Okay.
of his other movies, but we've never watched them.
That's curious. Now, I've heard a lot about Peppermint Candy. It is one of the few that I've been intrigued about by this director. I enjoyed Burning, which I remember Tony saying he had less positive feelings for.
No, I'm pro Burning now. We've had this same exchange, I think, but Burning is excellent. Yeah, go ahead.
Changing his mind just to try to get some sympathy here. No, these are all like probably one of the tougher options I think I've ever faced. I would love to watch any of these. There's one that's sticking out a little right now, but not by much. So I need some rebuttals. Connor, why should we watch Postman Always Rings Twice?
I think, like I said, we're all in like the top 100, if top 50, I don't know, like the IMDb, these are all very critically, very, very well loved films, very well respected films. I would just say mine, isn't it time to go back a little bit further into the past, something black and white, kind of reset our senses a bit with a different palette, a different kind of set of techniques, a different feeling. Wouldn't it be nice to kind of experience that? And thematically, okay, it's sort of an erotic film. It sort of deals with desire. It has crime as well. But, it's different, definitely in tone from these other two, which are both movies that I love. But it would depend if we want to kind of what tone, what vibe we're going for, Anthony. I'll leave it up to you, Doctor.
No, it's a very cool choice. There's something about that one that's like, of all the noirs, it's just one that just fascinates me for some reason. I don't know if it's as deeper or as rich as some of them, but there's something about John Garfield's performance in particular that just I love. Kirk, Dog Day Afternoon. This is Connor said it. It's an IMDb pick, though. Why should we watch it?
First of all, Connor, Anthony's a dentist. He's not a doctor. I think Dog Day Afternoon is a great film that deserves our attention because we started in New York. I think we all have a common bond based on our time here. I'm currently recording from Queens, and I think there's a sense of immediacy that one feels when they watch this movie. I think there's a kind of a collective, a Jungian vibe to it that that you almost subscribe to when you live in this city for a certain amount of time, which I think we've all met that threshold at one point or another in our lives. And so I like that idea, and I like the idea of doing more films, and this feels really, really like quintessentially New York. And yes, it's a different era. We have been kind of skewing or trending more newer recently, I should say. So Connor, I recognize that your choice is a direct in opposition to that or to counter that. I do feel as though 74, there's some remove there, right? That's what, 50 years ago. Yeah, 50 years. So I appreciate that piece of it. And I don't know, there's just a lot of meat on the bone here. It may be too kind of mainstream for us. I'm not sure. I think this does come down to your discretion, Anthony, both what you want to watch and what you feel our canon needs and what would garner the best discussion. Good luck in weighing those variables, but I feel like you at least have the knowledge to formulate, a decision, however cursory it may be.
No, thank you, Kirk. You're pulling on my heartstrings with the city. No, those are two really good counter arguments. Tony, peppermint candy, though, what is it about it?
It feels very just human in the same way that to me Bull Durham feels human. It's a lot about the passage of time and aging and things like that, and just these very universal human feelings that we all kind of plug into. Now that these other films don't have obviously human concerns. But I think it'd be good to do, something from outside the United States. I think Connor has a great argument for doing something, from the past, going back to do something black and white. I think it's, well timed to do that. However, I think it's also important to do, foreign films and Asian films and films from other cultures. And I think that this is a great one. I think there's a lot of potential points of discussion. And I think it's a movie that would, just based on what I know of all of our personalities in the movies we've done, I think would resonate. So, maybe not the strongest pitch, but that's why I'm pitching it today.
No, peppermint candy is cool. It's the one of his I've always been fascinated by. I am really curious about that one, and I know the structure of that film, so I'm kind of curious, how it pulls it off, or if I'd be into it the way I was Burning. I don't remember my reception to Oasis super well, but yeah, this is tough. This is one of those things where it's I would love to rewatch Postman Always Rings Twice just because I love that movie. I also am curious about Peppermint Candy, but I think I'm going to go with Dog Day Afternoon, if only because I actually don't think I've seen it. I think I've read a lot about it, and I think I know the storyline. I think I've tricked myself over the years to being confident that I had. But now I realize it, I don't think I actually have sat down to watch Al Pacino's, role, or John Cazale. I love the 70s New York film. I love the way you described it. I did not love Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, but it's time to give Sidney Lumet another chance. So I think we got to go with it. Dog Day Afternoon, 1975.
Yeah, he lost his fastball towards the end, but I'm very excited for this podcast. This is going to be a great one. I think we're going to have a good discussion on this and kind of really dig into all the various elements. But that's next time, folks. And you'll have to tune in to see if it's this dog's afternoon, but also during the day. Anthony, take us away.
I'll have what she's having.